um, in the chapter The Passing of the Great Company, where Aragorn is speaking with Eowyn. And we were talking last Friday, about the bottom of page 784. She says, shall I always be chosen? She's kind of implying, is that it? I'm just here to serve the men, make the beds, cook the meals, blah, 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 blah. She says, to mind them, to find food and beds. Aragorn replies, a time may come when none will return. Then there will be need of valor without renown, for none shall remember the deeds that are done in the last defense of your home. Yet the deeds will not be less valiant because they are unpraised. What's he mean? They won't be less valiant because they are unpraised.
Just because people won't talk about it doesn't mean it's not something worth doing.
Okay. Does Eowyn buy that argument? Does she accept that argument? Why not?
She thinks he's just trying to make her feel better about her current situation.
Okay, possibly. Why else? What does she claim to be?
A shield maiden?
Shield maiden. And not only a shield maiden, but one deserving of glory. Okay? All your words are but to say, she says, you are a woman and your part is in the house. Tolkien's writing this sometime in the mid-1940s. And Peter Jackson thinks he needs to turn Arwen into warrior princess because Tolkien doesn't have a strong female. I mean, that's a pretty strong female. I don't know. Maybe his wife said something to him like, hey, buddy, you change the kids' diapers this time. They're all grown by this point anyway. So, she says, but when the men have died in battle and honor, notice, in honor, you have leave to be burned in the house, for the men will need it no more. It doesn't matter then, Eowyn is saying, Aragorn is saying. This is her interpretation of Aragorn's speech. You're saying, Aragorn, that you can die defending the house because it's not going to be important anymore because no men are going to come back to it. That's her interpretation. But I am of the house of Eorl and not a serving woman. I can ride and wield blade, and I do not fear either pain or death. Notice, Aragorn, what we'll learn later, the healer. We've already seen a little bit of his healing ability, right? Back on Weathertop, Frodo gets stabbed, Aragorn gets some Atlas, he does a little bit of healing, but it's not permanent, etc. So, Ever the healer asks a very penetrating question. What do you fear? Come on, you gotta fear something. What is it you're really afraid of, Eowyn? This is the counselor, sitting her down and going, now tell me, how does that make you feel? Let's get to the heart of the matter. What does she fear? A cage. To stay behind bars until use and old age accept them. That is, accept the bars. And all chance of doing great deeds is gone beyond recall or desire. What does Eowyn equate with great deeds? What does she think are great deeds?
Glory.
How do you get glory? Battlefield. That's it. What obviously is not included in great deeds?
Everything else.
Be more specific. What about the cages?
Dying of old age.
Okay. More louder?
Housekeeping.
Housekeeping. Define housekeeping. You know the word economy? We hear a lot of talk about the economy, the national economy, GDP, blah, 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 blah. You know what all that really refers to? You go back to the original Greek, it's the spending of the house. You know who had the quote-unquote spending of the house? It wasn't the male. was the woman. Yeah, and even the word wife is not like the word husband. Husband. The hus comes from Old English house. House bound. That's what that word literally means. Wife just comes from withman. It means female person. It doesn't mean ball and chain. It doesn't mean bound to another. Okay? So, this comes from what? The woman's authority. But for her, there's no glory in that. This is what's glorious. Killing somebody. And or possibly being killed in a great battle. Okay? And yet you counseled me not to adventure on the road that I had chosen because it's perilous. In other words, you want me, Aragorn says, to what? Be caged. You want to cage me. Why? Because you don't want me to throw, quote unquote, throw away, her word, spend my life on a road that's perilous. Notice, it's perilous. That is, it could lead to peril. It is not suicide. Suicide always ends how?
Yeah.
You don't attempt suicide. This is where I would disagree with, psychiatrists and police. And you either do it or you don't. It's either suicide or it's not. Because the side part means you completed it. Okay? The self-killing kind of a thing. So, she says, so may one counsel another. I do not bid you flee from peril, but what? Ride to battle where your sword may win. What she put first? Renown. We don't use the word renown very much, unless we're talking about a renowned, economist who says, Trump's a dummy, or a renowned so-and-so who says, what's it really mean? Glory. Ride to battle where your sword may win. Glory, oh yeah, and victory. Shouldn't those be the other way around? Shouldn't you want the victory part first and then the glory part? By putting renown first, Eowyn is telling us what's really important to her.
Being talked about.
Being talked up. Glory. Why? Because she's, one of the Rohirrim, okay, which Tolkien says is kind of loosely based on Anglo-Saxon society, which was a heroic society. Deeds. We've got a variety of poems. I do them in one of my other courses, where the poet will say, the best thing you got going for you is what people coming after you say about you. The best eulogy is what those afterwards say. That was a good person. That was a good fighter. That was I would not see a thing that is high and excellent cast away needlessly. Talk about objectification, right? A thing. She calls Aragorn a thing. Nor would I. Therefore I say to you, lady, stay. You have no errand to the south. Her purpose is where? Here. Doing what? Protecting. She wants to be a shield maiden? She can be. Doing what? Protecting those who don't go off to battle. Okay? So, she says, when Aragorn says, you have no errand to the south, neither have those others who go with thee. Really? Gimli doesn't have any errand down in the south? Legolas doesn't have any errand down in the south? Elrohir and the sons of Elrond don't have any errand down in the south? There happens to be this big bad guy named Sauron. He's down in the south. They've got to go that direction. Okay? She says they go, why? Because they wouldn't be parted from thee, because they love thee. and she gives away what is really motivating her. But as we will see later in a chapter called, I think it's in the Houses of Healing, she only thinks she loves Aragorn. She loves the idea of Aragorn, not the real Aragorn. Because she doesn't really know the real Aragorn. How long have they known each other? And I'm not saying, you cannot have quote unquote love at first sight. Entirely possible. I would argue, in fact, it happened with my wife and I. Not on her part, on my part. Okay? But they've had a couple of conversations. What does she love about Aragorn?
He's a strong warrior.
Strong warrior. Leader of men. I mean, these guys follow him around like a pack of hounds. What else?
He is a thing that is high and excellent.
Thing that is high and excellent, kind of implying future king. That would be nice to bind yourself to, so to speak. So, Aragorn leaves the next morning. She gets on her knees. She begs him. He says no, etc. So, Aragorn goes to the Paths of the Dead. He goes to Dunharrow. They go through the tunnel, whether it's an actual tunnel. Some people believe it's an actual cave. Others that it is a door carved into a wall of rock, but it's really a valley. Okay? And in the valley, that is where the dead live. Not all the dead from all of Middle Earth, but the dead who did not fulfill an oath to Elendil and Isildur many, 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 many years before, who turned tail and ran. And Aragorn commands them, and they obey him. Why? He is the heir of Isildur. He's the only heir of Isildur who's ever shown up to command them to do this. So, we leave them in the Paths of the Dead, or just outside the Paths of the Dead, and Tolkien does what? So we leave these three, and Tolkien does what? He goes back to Merry and Pippin. Goes back to Merry with Chapter 3, The Muster of Rohan. Just 1 second. Chapter 2 was... Chapter 1 was Gandalf and Pippin. Chapter 2, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Chapter 3, we're going to follow Merry. Okay? And so, what do we see with Merry? Merry has sworn allegiance to Rohan, and Theoden tells him what? I don't want you coming off with me. Why? It'll be easier for me to die knowing you're safe. And we get page 802. Sorry, not 802. 804. Eowyn, who's already given Merry some mail and such, and a sword, but he already has a sword, which is going to be very important in a moment. Merry's being left behind, and page 804, right in the middle of the page, a rider comes up and whispers in Merry's ear, "Where will once not, a way opens, so we say." You want to go with the Lord of the Mark, don't you? Merry, I do. Then you can come with me. I'll bear you before me under my cloak. Such goodwill should not be denied. Such goodwill, such good desire should not be denied. Don't tell anybody. Merry says, "Thank you, but what's your name? I don't know who you are." "Oh, you don't? Call me Durnhelm." Dernhelm comes from the Old English. Comes from the Old English, Dyrnehelm, which simply means secret. This doesn't mean like helmet. It means secret protector. But in his infinite wisdom, what does Peter Jackson do in the film, if you're familiar with it? Not so secret. You know immediately. It's Eowyn. It's not a secret. Okay? And he removes, therefore, one of the big eucatastrophes of the novel that will come up pretty shortly. So we leave the muster of Rowan, and what do? So we had 1, 2, 3. We leave Mary, and we go back to chapter 4. We're back with Gandalf and Pippin. Okay? We see the Siege of Gondor. We're going to skip a bunch. And Faramir shows up. Pages 8, 10, and following. And Faramir sees Pippin, page 811, and says, "Not the first halfling I've seen." Gandalf's like, "What?" So he tells them what he has seen. He tells them about Sam. He tells them about Frodo. He tells them about Gollum. He tells them where Gollum was going to lead them next. Top of 812. Gandalf, "Cirith Ungol, Morgul Vale, win, Faramir, win." 2 days ago, Faramir says. Okay? So Gandalf's thinking. He's doing mental calculations. He's walking and pacing. Okay? And Faramir says to his father, "I hope I have not done ill." He looked at his father. And his father says, "Ill? Why do you ask? The men were under your command. Or do you ask for my judgment on all your deeds? Your bearing is lowly in my presence, since it is not long now since you returned from your own way at my counsel." He says, "No, I've seen how you looked at Mithrandir." In other words, you looked at Gandalf to see, should I say this? "Your father is old, but not yet doted. I can see and hear as was my wont, and little of what you have half said or left unsaid is now hidden from me. Alas, alas for Boromir." So Faramir says, "Maybe if I'd known what you wanted me to do beforehand, I would have done differently." Would you? Would that have availed to change your judgment? Now, did he just come right out and say, "Oh, by the way, Dad, Frodo has the Ring of Power. And I said before I knew Frodo had the Ring of Power that were this thing on the road, I would not stoop over to pick it up"? Nope. He didn't tell him that. Okay. So when Denethor says, "Would that have availed to change your judgment?" Denethor is saying, even if you had known my counsel, you would not have done what I wanted you to do. Okay? So they keep talking, and Faramir says, top of 813, "Oh, so you wish our places had been exchanged. You wish I had gone instead of Boromir," meaning, "and I was dead instead of Boromir." Yes. Yes, I wish that indeed. Okay, now just stop for a moment, take it out of the realm of literature, and take it in the realm of human relationships. Your father just told you he wished you were dead rather than your brother or sister, maybe. How's that going to sit?
Not too well.
Yeah, I mean, what's that going to do to your mindset about going forward from that day on? Especially when you know you got the mother of all battles getting ready to take place. Might put you in a mindset of, what the hell? I'm just going to go crazy out there. Why? Why does he wish that? For Boromir was loyal to me and no wizard's pupil. He would have brought me a mighty gift. This is why Faramir's character is so important and why Peter Jackson is an ass for changing it so much. What did Faramir say? We men of Gondor are what? We are truth tellers. We do not break our oaths. Did Boromir ever swear an oath not to attempt to take the ring? No, he didn't. But Faramir's implication is if Boromir had sworn that oath, it would have been really, really hard for him to break it. And Faramir, notice, says, "Okay, then I would have you remember, Dad, why it was I was an Ithilien and not he." What's he getting at?
one who set it up that way.
You're the one who told Boromir to go. I was the one who's supposed to go. Why? The vision came to Faramir. The vision with the little poem came to Faramir first, and then it came to Boromir. And he's like, yeah, don't remind me. Gandalf, calm down, you two. In no case would Boromir have brought it to you. You think Boromir would have been the dutiful son? No. He's dead. He died well. Died well? Did he die trying to take the ring? No. He died what? Defending Merry and Pippin. He sacrificed himself for two who were weak. May he sleep in peace. He would have stretched out his hand to this thing and taking it would have fallen. Denethor's like, yeah, you say that only because you couldn't persuade Boromir to your way of thinking. I have in this matter more lore and wisdom than you deem, Denethor says. I have in this matter, what's this matter? Notice they dance around the subject. The ring. He says, I have in the matter of the ring more lore, teaching, and wisdom than you deem, than you believe, or you expect. So Gandalf's like, okay, tell me your wisdom. What's he really mean? I've been around a few thousand years. You've been around 60. Tell me your wisdom, oh great and mighty steward. This is Gandalf's way of putting him down. Enough to perceive there are two follies. To use it is perilous. Okay, true there. He's got that part right. But to send it in the hands of a witless halfling into the land of the enemy, I mean, that's even more boneheaded than I thought you were capable of, Gandalf. That is just utter stupidity. Okay? And so what would you have done, Denethor? If you had been invited to the Council of Elrond, and notice, nobody was invited. They just showed up. So, if you had just shown up, what would be your advice? Neither of those two. Wouldn't use it, wouldn't take it to destroy it. So what's the third option?
Hide it.
What did they discuss at the Council of Elrond? It's been hidden for a long time, right? What good did that do? It's back. It's back. Most surely, not for any argument, would we have set this thing at a hazard beyond all but a fool's hope. So, Gandalf says, your thinking again is limited to what? Gondor. He says, you think, as is your wont, my lord, of Gondor only. But there are other men and other lives in time still to be. What's he mean, other men, other lives, and time still to be?
The clock keeps ticking, so people are...
Okay.
There are other people out there besides Gondor.
True. But he's not talking about the present. He's talking about the future. What's he saying? What did he tell Frodo back in the Shadow of the Past? Frodo said, I wish this need not have happened in my time. And Gandalf says, really? Really, Frodo? So does everyone that this kind of thing happens to. But you don't get to choose that. What do you get to choose? What to do with the time that you have. And he says, and now we have an opportunity to do what? To maybe take care of this thing so that people in days to come will have earth to till themselves, and they'll pull up the weeds, the evils, that they have to deal with. But this isn't an evil we have to pass on to them. Tolkien talks about applicability versus allegory in the foreword. Let's talk a little bit about applicability. How is this applicable today? Well, we don't have a ring of power that we have to destroy. But what do we have? we can take that idea of the ring of power and extrapolate it to little things. What little things do we have, let's say in our society, just in our country today, problems that we shouldn't pass on? I'm a generation older than you guys. That my generation shouldn't pass on to you, or that your generation shouldn't pass on to the next one, or that neither of our generations should pass on to generations 4 times beyond. How about little things like, I don't know, the national debt? That's a big thing. How about, quote unquote, insolvent Social Security? That's a big thing. Why? Because every one of you that works, you're paying into that. Dollars will get you donuts. You're not going to get it out. Okay? Those are, in one sense, those are little things. What about other war type things? Crazy little fat man over in North Korea. He's a problem. ISIS is still a problem. Anybody getting hold of a, nuke, that's a problem. EMPs, electromagnetic pulses, look them up. Just one good electromagnetic pulse, about 200 miles over Omaha, Nebraska, and 90% of Americans are dead within a year, according to a major congressional study that's just been declassified. 90%. Why? No infrastructure. No electricity, which means no water pumps work, no gasoline pumps work, no GPS, no cars. So where's everybody going to get their food? How many of you hunt and kill what you eat every day? How many of you dig a well? There's the problem. Okay? Those kinds of things. So, Gandalf's kind of talking to Denethor here about quit being so myopic. Quit looking at just the problem right in front of your face. Let's look long term. Right? So, Gandalf then says, and I even pity his whose? Sauron's slaves. In other words, if I can do something to alleviate their burden, their harm, I will. Because he's a steward of what? All of Middle Earth. That includes Mordor. It's not like all Middle Earth, but everybody in Mordor can just go to hell. They're nothing but enemies and deserve death. Okay? So Denethor says, and where other men will look for help, where will other men look for help if Gondor falls? What if we do fall, Gandalf? Then where's their help going to come from? He said, I would put this thing deep in the vaults of the mountain. I'd lock it up under NORAD. Problem there? Well, if Sauron's as strong as they think he is, bunker busters, metaphorically speaking. So, they keep talking, if. Faramir is sent off to get some rest. He's going to have to come back the next day. Okay. Pippin and Gandalf talk for a bit, because Pippin has overheard all of that. The next morning, page 816, Faramir comes back in, and Denethor gives him a command, bottom of the page. He says, I will not yield the river and the Pelennor unfought, if there is a captain here who has still the courage to do his Lord's will. And Faramir goes, I'll do it. I'll go. I'll fight in his stead. I do. Faramir. But if I should return, think better of me. Well, that depends on how you return. What's he implying?
If you're alive or dead.
Okay. It might be the old Spartan wives saying to their husbands as they get ready to go off fight the Athenians in war, either return on your shield or with it. Dead, being carried on the shield, or carrying it. Don't return any other way. Either you're victorious or you're dead. Don't return, tail between your legs. So just before Faramir leaves, Gandalf says, "Shh, cool, calm down, man. Your father still loves you. He'll remember." So Faramir goes off. And we get the beginning of the fight, or the battle, okay? We're going to skip a bit. Faramir's going around putting out fires, etc. The Nazgul come. Who are the Nazgul? They are either the Black Riders themselves or the things that the Black Riders fly on. Tolkien's never specifically clear, okay? So, they come, the battle is going on, they're lobbying, the forces of Sauron are lobbying the heads of dead Gondorians over the city walls to break the will and spirit of the people. And let's see here. Faramir returns wounded. Page 825. Denethor is told the first circle of the city is burning. Bear in mind, Gondor looks like a wedding cake. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 circles like this. Okay, this one is all aflame. Men are running from the walls, leaving them unmanned. Denethor says, "Why? Why do the fools fall? Better to burn sooner than late. For burn we must. Go back to your bonfire." He says, "Me, I'm going to go to my pyre. That is my funeral pyre. I'm going to take Faramir with me, and we're going to burn together. We will go to the halls of our fathers." And Pippin hears all this. He's like, "Wait, but Faramir's not dead yet." So he goes off to find Gandalf. Okay. Let's see here. Pippin runs to Baragon. He tells Baragon what's going on. Baragon goes up to try to stop Denethor, and we get Pippin finally sees Gandalf, page 829. He finds Gandalf, and there's Gandalf on Shadowfax at, I was going to do a quiz today, I just remembered. There's Gandalf on Shadowfax at the entrance to Minas Tirith, at the gates. And the gates burst open. For the first time in history, an enemy breaches the gates of the city. In rode the Lord of the Nazgul, a great black shape against the fires beyond. He loomed up, grown to a vast menace of despair. In rode the Lord of the Nazgul, under the archway that no enemy ever yet had passed, and all fled before his face, all save one. And there's Gandalf. And Gandalf says, "You cannot enter here. Go back to the abyss prepared for you. Go back, fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master." Kind of like what he said to the Balrog. Go into the abyss. The Black Rider flings back his hood. There's a crown, no head, red fire, and says, old fool, this is my hour." In other words, I've won. Do you not know death when you see it? Die now and curse in vain. That is an exact line with one word missing from the Old Testament story, or the Old Testament book of Job. After Job's children are wiped out, his possessions are destroyed, and Job is touched by Satan. So he has, second millennium BC version of AIDS. I mean, just boils all over him. His wife says to him, "Die now and curse God in vain." Or curse God in vain and die now. It's one of the two. He lifts the sword and Gandalf doesn't move. Gandalf just sits there. And what happens? Tolkien gives us a little indication that maybe not all is as bleak as it seems. Because somewhere, off in the stupid city, a rooster doesn't know that all hell's about to break loose. And a rooster does what a rooster does in the morning. It just crows. Why is that significant?
It's symbol of a new morning, symbol of a new time?
It's exactly what it is. The natural world, so to speak, is saying, not so fast. Because the rooster crows, and then what happens? Off in the distance, we hear the horns of Rowan. And what do? 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Notice, Tolkien's done what? He's broken the pattern that he started. 1, 2, 3, 4. We get to this one. Okay? We go to Merry. So we're going to skip a whole bunch. Skip the stuff about the Woesmen and such. And we see page 840, Snowmane, Theoden's horse, is frightened by the captain of the Nine because as soon as the Rohirrim horns blow, the chief of the Nazgul, the captain of the Nine, leaves the city and goes out. Okay? And Theoden's horse rears up and falls on Theoden. We're told, bottom of 840. But Theoden was not utterly forsaken. The knights of his house lay slain about him, and yet there's one still. There's Durnhelm standing there, and Merry thinks to himself, Kingsman, come on, you got to stay by him. But his will made no answer, and his body shook, and he didn't want to see what there was. And Durnhelm cries out, page 841, Begone, foul Dwemer Lake, Lord of Carrion, leave the dead in peace. The voice says, come not between the Nazgul and his prey, kind of making it sound like the Nazgul is the thing he's flying on. In other words, the Nazgul is going to eat your lord and his horse too. And Durnhelm says, do what you will, I will hinder it if I may. Hinder me, thou fool, no living man may hinder me. And surprise, you catastrophe, I'm not a man. Here's where Tolkien plays with language to say he's being gender specific. That is, the Black Rider is being gender specific. And Eowyn's going, no man parts. You look upon a woman, Eowyn, I am Ealmon's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Begone if you be not deathless for living or dark and dead, I will smite you. Now, over here I said, Rohirrim are kind of Anglo-Saxon in origin. Real briefly. A guy by the name of C.L. Wren, Anglo-Saxon scholar, wrote a book called A Study of Old English. And in that book, he talks about what he calls the fourfold Germanic ethic. This is kind of the heroic, if you want, ethos of all Germanic peoples. That's Anglo-Saxons. Old English, okay? Here's that ethic, real quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Duty to your lord. Duty to your kin. Duty to avenge your lord and kin. And then, kind of what's called acceptance of weird. Or I'm going to simplify that to fate. So, notice the first three things. Duty to your Lord. Your Lord gives you a command, you do that command. Okay? Duty to your kin. You have a responsibility to your family, to your bloodline. Something happens to your family, an individual in your family, or to your Lord, you have a duty. You are bound to avenge. You go kill one of theirs. If they kill one of yours. Okay? And if that Lord is also your kin, oh, that's just like, Full House. I mean, it's just everything. There's no getting out of that. Okay? And then weird, I translate kind of as fate. It's what will be, will be. And it's whatever, man. You just kind of accept that. You can't fight against fate. Okay? So, No living man may hinder me. And what does Durnhelm say? You stand between me and my lord and kin. I got to do this. There's no stopping me. So, what happens? Durnhelm reveals herself. Mary comes up slowly behind the Nazgul. The guy swings his mace first at her. She stops it with her shield. Shield and arm are broken. He stands over her with his sword. You know. What does Mary do? Stabs him where? If you've ever had knee pain, I've had multiple knee surgeries. In the back of the knee. Right? But he's a spirit, right? He's a wraith, but he has some kind of bodily presence. Right? What does Mary stab him with? The sword he got from the barrow mound that Tom Bombadil took out of the barrel. And Tom Bombadil looked at those swords and told them what? These swords were woven, were forged, and had spells on them for fighting the Witch King of Angmar. And that's the person Mary just stabbed. That's why Mary's sword had any effect. If it had just been some Rohirrim sword he found, it would have just been like cutting through sheer nothing. But the very fact that this thing had spells on it for fighting against this individual, that made it hurt. He falls forward. Why? You get stabbed in the back of the knee, you rip a hamstring, you're going to fall forward.
It kind of reminds me of when Gollum was touching Frodo's knee and being the opposite of that.
Yeah, kind of. Okay? And so he falls forward, and what does Eowyn have to do? Well, one arm's broken. Her sword's not some little sword like this. It's probably a big broadsword. Those aren't made to be used with one hand. A broadsword is a two-handed beating implement. It's not sharp on the edges like a razor. You beat someone to death with it. Yeah, you can thrust them through. Why? It does have a point. It doesn't take much of a point to pierce a body. Really. Okay? A spoon. You can pierce a body with a spoon. Okay? She just has to hold it because he's falling. And she holds it right through what would be his neck, and he disappears. So what happens when he disappears for the orcs and such that are in the area fighting? Holy, there goes our captain. Okay. So, Mary crawls up to Theoden. He ain't dead yet. He's mostly dead. And Theoden says, grieve not, it is forgiven. Bottom of 842, top of 843. It is forgiven. Great heart will not be denied. Live now in blessedness, and when you sit in peace with your pipe, think of me, because I'm never going to be able to smoke with you. And he dies. Okay? So, Theoden's body is carried kind of, in state into Minas Tirith. Eowyn is carried in. What about Mary? Nope, nobody sees him. So he walks and stumbles on in. So we're going to skip a bunch. Chapter 7, Pyre of Denethor. Gandalf goes up, has words with Denethor, and what does he discover? What does Denethor reveal he has? The stone of Minas Tirith. The Palantir of Minas Tirith. And Gandalf's like, yep, that makes sense. The only problem is, what's the difference between Denethor and Aragorn?
Aragorn has the will to command it.
Aragorn has the will to command it. What else? He has the right to command it. Aragorn is the future king. Denethor is a steward. So when Aragorn looks into the Palantir of Orthanc, what does he do to Sauron? He forces Sauron to his will. He makes Sauron see what he wants Sauron to see. Aragorn isn't literally dressed out in all of his kingly regalia. He doesn't, keep a gym bag with the whole kingly attire in it. But he shows himself in that way to Sauron. What about Denethor? He sees what Sauron wants him to see. Denethor sees kind of like what the United States used to see back in the good days of the Cold War. Every May 1st, we get, evening news, and there'd be the images from Moscow Red Square when the Soviets would be putting on their big May Day parades. They still do it in China and North Korea. Okay? All the latest missiles, the latest tanks. I mean, there'd be, this parade miles long. Showing what? Here's our military might. That's exactly what Sauron showed Denethor. Now remember, Aragorn says the stones can't lie. In other words, he couldn't show mirages of that. He showed him what was there. Okay? So, just on the basis of that, Denethor had reason to think, we're screwed. We can't win this. Chapter 8, Houses of Healing. So, Merry does get brought up, and they see him. Aragorn calls for Athelas, or King's Foil, to be brought in, and Yorith, the old woman, gets some. So what happens? He puts it in water, breaks it up, page 866. He goes to Faramir. And he calls Faramir, and Faramir says, top of the page, "My lord, you called me, I come. What does the king command?" Now, did Aragorn say, "Faramir, I, your king, command you to come from the land of the dark"? No, he doesn't. Why does Faramir call him king? It's recognition. It's just recognition. It's not like he saw a picture of him. It's just, he knows. There's a line in King Lear when King Lear's right-hand man named Kent in disguise, because Lear banished him because Lear's going crazy. When Kent in disguise comes up to Lear and says, "I would serve you." And he's like, "Why?" He says, "You have that about you which speaks of authority." That's the same thing here. Okay? So, Aragorn says, "Walk no more in the shadows, blah, 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 blah. Be ready when I return." Who would lie idle when the king has returned? Okay? And Yorith says, "Told you, hands of a healer." And what happens? Tweets it out. I mean, just words start spreading throughout Minas Tirith. Okay? So he goes to Éowyn. Says, "Man, this is bad. Broken arm, that's okay, that'll fix. There's something else, though. There's another problem." So he tries to bring her out. He talks to Éomer and says, "Maybe you could tell him." He goes, "No, I didn't think there was anything wrong with her till you showed up." Why has her soul been disheartened? What happened long before Aragorn entered the picture? Worm tongue. Aragorn says, Gandalf says, sorry, page 867. "Think you that Wormtongue had poison only for Theoden's ears? Dotard, what is the house of Errol? Have you not heard those words before? Saruman spoke them. I do not doubt that Wormtongue at home wrapped their meaning in term nor cunning. If your sister's love for you and her will still bent to her duty had not restrained her lips, you might have heard even such things as these escape them." And then Éomer is silent. Aragorn says, "I saw what you saw." Aragorn calls her, tells her to wake, and then he tells Éomer, "You've got to be the one to fully bring her out." Why? She loves you more than she does me. Okay? Then he goes to Merry. He calls Merry out. Merry asks for some weed so they can smoke, etc. And then he remembers what Theoden said and said, "No, I'll never smoke again." Why? He vowed to smoke a pipe with Theoden. He can't anymore. He's going to stick to that vow. Aragorn says, smoke it anyways. In memory. So every time you take a draft, you take a pull on that pipe, think of Theoden. Do it kind of as a memorial to him. Mary's like, okay, that's cool, I can do that. Okay? So, page 871. Aragorn comes to the doors from inside the Houses of Healing. That is, he's going to get ready to leave. And what's happened? There's a crowd. At the doors of the houses, many were already gathered to see Aragorn. They followed after him. And when at last he had stopped, men came and prayed that he would heal their kinsmen, or their friends whose lives were in peril, through hurt or wound, or who lay under the black shadow. And Aragorn arose and went out, and he sent for the sons of Elrond, and together they labored far. And why the sons of Elrond? They're not the hands of a healer, the hands of a king, but they are elves. And they do have healing abilities. Okay? So notice, Aragorn does what? He goes and heals people. Now, how did Aragorn enter the battle? Because last time we saw him, he was down here with the dead, right? So what did he do? Got to the river, took the boats at Pelargir. Didn't personally, the dead kind of scared everybody off of him. Okay? And they rode up the Anduin, and right at the opportune time, they unfurled his pennant. And what do we see? We see the white tree and the 7 stars of Minas Tirith, the symbol of the king. So you've got Gondor over here, you got the river here, you got the enemy here. The captain of the nine's been killed. You got the White Rider, kind of out there doing some stuff. And then comes the symbol of the king. These guys lose all their will. They get slaughtered. All right? So, chapter 9. What's the last debate? What do they need a debate about?
Whether to go help Frodo and Sam.
So what's, as with the Council of Elrond, what are some of the things they talk about? What do some people counsel? Build up the defenses. Build a wall. Really, really big wall, Keep them out for as long as we can. That's one option. What does Gandalf say about that wall? Or those defenses? It won't work. Ultimately, it will fail. Okay? The United States used to think we had a wall, so to speak. It's called the Atlantic, the Pacific, southern border, northern border. And then on one bright, sunny, early September morning, that all changed. Because while we didn't have metaphorical walls, somebody came in and flew planes into some of our buildings, and we didn't take very kindly to that. Okay? Gandalf says that's not going to work. So what can they do? We can still build up our defenses, or, some say, well, we can march south, help Frodo. No, can't do that. So what are they going to do with the 2 minutes we have?
They're going to go draw out the forces of Mordor.
So they become distraction or target, bait. They become bait. They want Sauron to do what?
Only focus on them.
Empty Mordor. Pour all of his forces out here so that 2 midgets back here can slip through the back door and try and get in. Okay? What does Gandalf say? We're gonna have to come back to this anyways. But what does he say? That's probably gonna mean. Yeah, we're gonna die, folks. I mean, this isn't gonna look good. But maybe we can buy enough chance for Frodo to make it. Okay, we'll stop there. We'll pick up with 878 on Wednesday and have a quiz on 2 Towers. Sorry, I completely forgot.